Hi, friends. I have some games to share with you. This is from the Las Vegas National Open, which I just played in last week. It's 7 rounds for all these sections below the open section. I was not in the open section, I would have been destroyed. I'm not there yet, not quite there yet. But yeah, open section was 9 games at 5 days. I actually saw the dates of the tournament starting June 16th to the 20th. So I thought, I'll go a day early. And my good friend, John, he told me, why are you so early? And I said, what do you mean? I'm there the day before the tournament on the 15th. He says, dude, your section doesn't start until the 17th. So I ended up going a day early, but it was all good because I went with my other good friend Ryan to the Vegas Golden Knights game. It was game 3, I believe. They lost that game and subsequently lost the series. So maybe we were bad luck, but it was really fun nonetheless. I'm a huge hockey fan, as you can tell by my blue sign. I actually ended up wearing a blue shirt, and Petrangelo scored the only 2 goals for Vegas, but I'm sure most of you don't care. But yeah, my first day on the 17th, actually, I ended up not even really playing anyone because my first round opponent didn't show up. So I had another friend set my clock for me. I didn't know how to set the clock that I had. And my good friend Alejandro Ramirez, who I saw wandering the tournament hall, graciously set up my clock so that I could time 30 minutes out on my opponent and claim the win. So that was kind of funny. But yeah, the second day I actually played. Actually, the rest of the remaining days I played 3 games. So basically, no, sorry, 2 games each. But yeah, without further ado, I will get into the games. So I'll probably do a video per game. This is just the first game, first introductory to I guess you would call this a series of my game reviews from Vegas. And the last game, I'll let you guys know the updates, the results, the scores, and potential prizes. So try to stay tuned, and we'll get right into it. So here's my first game that I played. This is against a young child who was rated 1645, and the ratings that I have are not actually the ratings that was sent to me at the time of the match. These are the ratings that I looked at after the fact. These aren't the updated ones. This is like pre-tournament ratings. Same with my rating. So at the start of the tournament, I was 1779 USCF. Not that it really matters, but that's just a heads up. All the players but one, I didn't include their names, but you can find it on the USCF tournament pages. So if you were really curious. So here I have the white pieces. Luckily, the first day where my opponent didn't show up, I had black. So the second day I had white here. And I like to play my bishop to c4 on move 2, Italian opening. So a lot of times I get knight f6. And that's pretty common because when you start with the knight first attacking this pawn, black likes to defend right away. Bishop here doesn't really come with a threat. So black tries to make a threat of their own, attacking my pawn. But I never defend this. I always bring the knight f to f3, attacking this pawn now. And if they take this, I'll probably play d3, attack the knight back, and this pawn will fall eventually back. But they typically go knight c6 here, and I think I had this game twice out of this tournament. So here I just play d3, saving my e-pawn. They go bishop out, so it's kind of like a Joko piano. I bring the bishop out with a pin on their knights. They immediately question the bishop. I just go back. And here they play d6, opening up their bishop, so I go h3. And now they lash out with g5. So g5, just breaking this pin, which can be pretty annoying. My knight's going to come here and put even more pressure on the knight, and it's especially annoying because the knight has already come to c6 and not to d7, and the bishop's blocked out by the pawn here on d6, so the bishop can't break this pin. So they go g5, I bring the bishop back, and so now this kingside pawn structure is weak, and this will be an easier target for me to attack later. Surprisingly to me, they castled right into it. So they just go kingside here. I probably would not have done that myself. It's not like it's game over, but it just makes my life a little bit easier. I think it's definitely playable, but I would have considered maybe bringing the bishop out first, developing the queen, maybe going king side or queen side, excuse me. But no, they immediately go king side. So here we go c3. Most commonly, I bring my knight out to c3. So my thought process here was I was just trying to preserve this light square bishop because they'll have some weaknesses down the line, perhaps, and I want to reroute here. And c3 also helps prepare for a d4 pawn push. So here they just develop the queen. I bring the knight to d2, bishop here now, and they're threatening knight a5. So like I said, I wanted to save the bishop, so c3 kind of makes a flight square for the bishop. If they went knight a5 earlier, I had bishop to b5. If they attack the bishop with a pawn, then I can go back to a4, and then I'm back to c2, safe and sound. With the bishop here now, knight a5 threatens to trap the bishop because there's no longer this bishop b5 move, because the bishop will then be covering that square. So I go bishop back to b3, again, trying to preserve this. They develop a rook. I reroute the knight. For the longest time, I was debating whether or not castling short or castling long, because I like this rook on the h-file. I'm always thinking about playing h4 to just bust things open, but they are ready to play g4. So don't really want to allow this a knight move, and then pawn here really locks things up. So didn't go for that quite yet. Here now they move the bishop for a second time. They're going to e6, trying to trade here, and bishop c2 would make sense along the lines of what I've just been saying about saving the bishop, but I just reroute this knight, didn't like it on f1, only put it there temporarily to go to e3, and now I'm looking at some light squares here, maybe even covering g4, again maybe preparing for h4, but they take the knight immediately, pawn takes, and now we have a semi-open f-file to potentially work with. And here they go d5. I wasn't the biggest fan of d5 because it really weakens e5. So I just take on e5. And one thing I do have to be wary about is this bishop moving with discovery, because the queen would then open up an attack. So they take, I take. Luckily, the bishop doesn't have great discoveries. I can take here to cash out if I need to. But they take back on e4, restoring material balance. And I can't take because it's pinned, and it also just wouldn't be a good move, double isolating these pawns. But simply I play d4, making sure the bishop's protected, and just taking the space in the center. Here they go knight back. So eventually I'm going to put a piece on the f-file and pressure this knight to move. Maybe they moved a little premature, but yeah, the knight doesn't have that many great squares. Maybe d7 was a bit better. But they go back to h7, and now I go queen to h5. So the knight was guarding these light squares, and now it's not, so I come in immediately. Maybe he had something better, maybe just simply castling, but still a fan of this move, putting pressure on h6. And here they trade bishops, and they go queen e6. So they're guarding this pawn with the queen. At this point, I considered taking on a7, considered taking on c7. They might have some move like this, getting the pawn back, but again, they have h6 hanging. Their position is really weak. This bishop's really strong. And f6 doesn't really work because, like I said, h6 falls, and now that pins the pawn to the queen. So the queen would no longer be protected by this pawn, and the pawn couldn't take because it's pinned. So yeah, this bishop's really well placed here. I simply castle. So like I said, I've been contemplating castling queenside or kingside for a while now. This is actually move 20. This is like the latest I've ever castled. But yeah, this is just a really strong move, getting the king out of the center and putting the rook on the f-file most importantly. So here they decide to save a7. They play a6. And here I have a knockout move that was really strong. I actually glanced over it, but didn't calculate further enough in the game to actually play it. So kind of disappointed I missed this one, but feel free to pause the video if you want to look for it yourself. The move is using this rook on the open f-file, rook f6. So super strong move, basically attacking the queen, attacking h6. And if knight takes, well, then queen takes h6, and there's not much you can do about this situation because If the knight moves, you're blundering mate. And if the knight doesn't move, very difficult to save this guy. If you go here, something like that, then we have rook f1. And again, very difficult to save mate. At this point, it says g4, but then just queen g5 check, and you take here next, and eventually, basically, the best move here even is just take the bishop. So black has to give up the queen at this point. So if you found rook f6, congrats. That's the best move on the board. I unfortunately did not play this move. I played the very simple bishop takes c7. So see a pawn, take a pawn. Obviously, I didn't live by that motto the move before, but at this point, they saved the a pawn, and I was like, maybe I should have taken a7. So here I cashed out on c7. Position's still totally fine for white. In fact, still much better, but not as good as rook f6, obviously. So these are the kind of moves that I really need to see, that I want to see. But luckily, this position is really good for me. These passed pawns now are really strong. I mean, d4 is a connected passed pawn. Black's king is kind of in shambles over here. This knight, really sad piece. But they attack the bishop, save the rook at the same time. I just simply go back to where it was. Really perfect square. Can't complain. And now they go rook to c6 because this, maybe they saw it. Now, I have no idea. I still don't think I was considering it. But rook f6 is still a threat here. So rook to c6 helps protect along the 6th rank. So rook f6 no longer works at this point. But here I noticed that the rook is a little short on squares, actually. And d5 would be a fork of the queen and the rook. So I tried to prepare for d5. I played c4. And here they see this. They should probably move the queen or the rook. They do move the rook, but now the rook is in an even worse predicament. Basically, both of its pawns blocking it. It is attacking b3, but I noticed that this bishop and this pawn fork threat is really cutting off a lot of squares from this rook. So here I decide to save b3. I go queen d1. It looks like a really passive move, but it comes with a strong threat, a threat that my opponent actually missed. I think the queen really needs to move at this point, otherwise the rook's going to be trapped. And we'll see exactly what happens if the queen doesn't move. So they play f5. They missed the threat. Rook to c7, or bishop to c7. Just simply attacking the rook, but you'll notice, again, the rook can't go here, guarded by the bishop. Rook can't go here because of the fork. If the rook goes down, then bishop here actually completely traps the rook. So the rook is toast. And the best that black can do here is try to trade the rook for my bishop. And they do it in a really awkward way, actually. They go here. It looks like it threatens the bishop because it does. But again, they probably needed some queen move so that they could at least try to bring the rook to safety and really force me to take here. In this position, they're not forcing me to take. In fact, they're really weakening the back rank. And it might seem like the back rank's really far away for any of my pawns, but this d4 pawn comes with a punch to the queen. So the queen is hit, and the queen is the defender of the rook. So not taking the exchange right away, kicking the queen first, seeing where the queen will go. The queen really has two options here. And the queen decides to go to f6. And again, not taking the rook right away, simply playing d6. So this, again, just a simple pawn move, not directly hitting anything, but indirectly disconnecting the queen and the rook. So this is threatening to win the rook outright. And if the rook goes to seemingly the only safe square to c6, then I will simply play d7. So yeah, actually the pawn is unstoppable without giving up significant material sacrifice, which is exactly what my opponent does here. They decide to finally give up that rook. Rook takes, and now here I decide to go with queen takes, offering a queen trade. And if you're black in the situation, you want to play on, you do not want to trade queens. You're down in material. You need to keep fighting. Maybe a move like rook or queen here with a counter punch. I mean, you have to find ways to get counterplay, maybe taking a pawn. I mean, the options aren't great. They're actually pretty bad. But trading queens here is the same as resigning, essentially, uh, without actually resigning. So queen takes, bishop takes, and knight here again, a really, really dismissive move, a passive move, basically a resignation move. Better would have been knight to f6, keeping the piece on the board, trying to maintain some material for some counter chances. I mean, they always say the knights in the end are very tricky. You never know. I could blunder some fork or something. But like I said, my opponent was very young, and he probably was just playing on until checkmate, which is actually exactly what he did. So no problem with me there. That's totally fine. But again, if you're going to play on, try to put up the best resistance, I guess. Maybe he just thought this was best, but when you put the knight here, I'm just going to take it because simplification is key when you're up material. So now I just get my rooks active, attack the extra pawns, and here just attacking. You can't really save it without trading rooks. So takes, and yeah, really not that much to go over at this point in the game, but pretty solid game for my first game since February 2019. That was my last tournament, U.S. Amateur Team West, back in San Jose. But yeah, this was fun. So good start to the tournament, and I'll just show you the rest of the game, I guess. But yeah, I just scooped up these last few pawns and put the king on the back rank and just make a queen with mate. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that game. This was game 1 that I played. Technically at this point I'm 2 out of 2 because the forfeit win in round 1. But yeah, stay tuned for the next one. I'll try to make that one soon. Appreciate you guys watching till this far. If you're still here, thank you really a lot. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.